Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're navigating a really fascinating landscape.
Yeah, it's quite a mix.
We've got a Trump Burger restaurant caught up in legal fights, and then we're also looking back at a judge's, really deep thoughts on liberty.
Exactly.
So we've pulled together a whole stack of sources for you, articles, reports, some really insightful notes.
All tailored for you, the listener.
And our mission, as always, is to pull out the most important stuff, those key nuggets of knowledge, so you feel properly informed, but without getting totally overloaded.
That's the plan. And as we unpack all this, you'll start to see some, pretty interesting connections.
Right. Between things that seem totally separate at first glance.
Yeah, like political strategy, legal fights, economic shifts, cultural stuff, even some surprising personal stories. It's all about seeing what's going on beneath the surface.
Okay, so let's dive right in. This first story is, it's fascinating and kind of ironic.
The Trump Burger saga.
Exactly. Our sources introduce us to Roland Mehrez Beainy. He's an immigrant from Lebanon, pursuing his American dream, right? Opened this restaurant chain called Trump Burger.
And the look of the place, the sources say, is just wall-to-wall Trump memorabilia.
Even the burger buns are branded with Trump's name.
Wow.
And yeah, for, let's call it balance, there's a Biden burger on the menu too.
Okay, what's that like?
Well, the description, and this is unedited, reads, 1 ounce beef topped with old tomato and our oldest buns unavailable due cheating and inflation, $50.99.
Oh my, yeah. The satire there is something else, almost as skillful as the grammar, as the sources know.
Right. But this whole venture, this dream, it ran into trouble pretty fast. 2 big things happened.
Yeah, the sources really highlight this. First up, Trump's lawyers. They sent Beainy a cease and desist letter.
Because you don't use the name without paying.
Pretty much. The source kind of frames it as the first rule of Trumpism. Don't use his name unless he gets a cut. So that's now tangled up in court.
And wasn't he already dealing with other lawsuits?
Yeah, that's the other layer. He was already fighting with partners over ownership and profits. So messy.
Okay, so the cease and desist is one thing, but you said 2 big complications. What was the other one the sources point to?
Well, this is maybe the more surprising part. All the attention he got, interviews, these lawsuits, it led people to discover something else.
Which was?
He's undocumented.
Oh.
Yeah, he came here legally on a guest visa, but then overstayed after a divorce.
Wow. So the irony is just palpable. Someone who seemed to admire a figure known for, pretty strong anti-immigration views.
Exactly. It's this incredibly complex mix. Ambition, political branding, immigration law. And it all kind of imploded on itself because the public persona drew attention to the private vulnerability.
So what's next for him?
Well, he's got a hearing coming up in a couple of months. The sources suggest it's pretty likely he'll be deported by ICE.
It's just a really stark story, isn't it, how all these things can collide?
Absolutely. Personal ambition, political identity, the letter of the law.
Yeah. Okay, so thinking about those struggles, liberty, the American dream, that actually brings us to Judge Learned Hand.
Yes. A really significant figure.
Maybe not a household name for everyone, but our sources argue he's possibly the most important American judge never to sit on the Supreme Court.
And he was considered for it, right? By both parties.
Yeah, Republican and Democratic administrations thought about appointing him. His career was just legendary.
It really was. Appointed a federal judge at just 37, served actively for 42 years, then another 10 on senior status.
And still the most cited lower court judge in Supreme Court decisions.
Still is. And he was known for persuading his colleagues, that they should only overturn Congress in really extreme situations, judicial restraint.
But we're diving into him today, not just for the judicial stuff, but for a speech he gave, a really powerful one.
Right, 1944, middle of World War II. He gave this address in Central Park for I Am an American Day.
To over 1 million people, apparently. Many of them new citizens. The sources call it viral for its time.
And what he said about liberty, it's profound. He warned against putting too much faith just in legal structures.
Can you share that quote? It's quite striking.
Sure. He said, I often wonder whether we do not rest our hopes too much upon constitutions, upon laws, and upon courts. These are false hopes. Believe me, these are false hopes.
Wow. So where does liberty lie, according to Hansi?
Liberty, he said, lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can even do much to help it.
He admitted he couldn't perfectly define that spirit of liberty, right?
No, but he described his faith in it. He said it's the spirit which is not too sure that it is right.
Humility.
Exactly. The spirit which seeks to understand the mind of other men and women, the spirit which weighs their interests alongside its own without bias.
And he talked about an America that hasn't quite been achieved yet.
Yeah, an America that has never been and which may never be, nay, which never will be except as the conscience and courage of Americans create it, requires active effort.
It's incredible how relevant those words feel today, 80 years later.
Absolutely. And if you connect it back to, say, the Beainy story, Hand's warning just gets sharper, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, when you see these foundational ideas, liberty, the American dream, getting tangled up with, like transactional branding or getting crushed by a rigid application of law, that's exactly what Hand was warning about.
When liberty isn't actively cherished in people's hearts.
Right. Especially when outside forces try to define it or restrict it, or when we just get too certain that we're the ones who are right, that's when it starts to fray.
So if liberty lives in the heart, as Hand said, what happens when the actual rules, the lines that shape our public life, get manipulated?
Well, that leads us straight into gerrymandering, the high-stakes game of drawing political maps.
And our sources point to a real redistricting war heating up, particularly between Texas and California.
Yeah, in Texas, you had this situation where Democratic legislators actually left the state. Quorum busting, it's called.
To stop Governor Abbott's plan to redraw the maps.
Exactly. He wanted to create 5 more districts leaning Republican. So the Dems tried to block it by denying a quorum.
But that couldn't last forever?
No. They faced fines, and they have part-time jobs back home they needed to get back to. So they're returning.
And the likely outcome?
It seems likely Abbott will get his way. Democrats plan to sue, of course, but the Supreme Court has generally upheld partisan gerrymanders, making it a tough fight.
Okay, meanwhile, out on the West Coast, California's Governor Newsom has a different plan.
Right. He's proposing a bill to temporarily override their current House map.
Temporarily. For which elections?
For 2026, 2028, and 2030. The idea is to create a map more friendly to Democrats for those cycles. After the 2030 census, the state's independent commission would take back map drawing duties.
So what's the strategy there according to the sources? What's he aiming for?
Well, the sources mentioned leaked lists targeting 9 districts. The goal seems to be flipping maybe 3 to 5 seats to safe Democratic status.
And shoring up some existing Democrats.
Yeah, giving extra armor, as the source puts it, to about 5 vulnerable incumbents.
Newsom described the map as pretty conservative, though.
He did, but the source notes that a more aggressive, full mercenary approach could potentially make almost the entire California delegation Democratic, just based on population spread.
That's fascinating. So the obvious question is, why isn't he pushing harder for that if the sources think it's possible?
Good question. The thinking seems to be twofold. 1, don't risk existing safe blue seats by shaking things up too much.
And 2,
manage appearances.
Yeah.
Because this new map needs voter approval.
Ah, right. In a special election this November. How's that looking?
Well, there was a recent poll showing only 36% support, which sounds bad.
Yeah.
But the source really digs into why that poll might be misleading. Issues with how the question was asked too long, kind of leading.
And maybe not accurately reflecting Newsom's actual proposal.
Exactly. The thinking is, many voters might actually like the independent commission long-term, but also be willing to support Newsom's temporary override now, kind of a desperate times, desperate measures thing.
So the fight over that ballot measure will be fierce.
Definitely. You got Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former Republican governor who championed the independent commission, leading the opposition.
He'll have money behind him.
Oh, yeah. Significant Republican donors are expected to join him. They might outspend the Democrats.
But money isn't always everything in these ballot fights, right?
That's what the sources remind us, yeah. Doesn't always guarantee a win.
And there was one more piece of irony the sources mentioned here?
Ah, yes. As Governor Newsom was making this announcement, at the Japanese American National Museum in L.A., ICE was literally conducting raids and arrests outside the museum.
Wow. Undocumented immigrants being arrested right there.
Yeah. It just loops back again to that complicated intersection of politics, immigration, optics. It's all tangled.
Okay, so from drawing lines on maps, let's shift to the economic lines hitting our wallets. Inflation numbers.
Right. The Producer Price Index, PPI, that's what businesses pay. It jumped 0.9% in July.
Which is the biggest monthly jump in.
3 years.
And the interpretation of that.
Well, the general take is that producers just can't or won't absorb the costs of tariffs anymore. They're passing them on.
So it's a leading indicator. We'll see this at the checkout line soon.
Eventually, yes. And the thing is, the full whack of the tariffs hasn't even hit yet. Some are still coming online.
Even Fox Business called it a byproduct of a trade war, didn't they?
They did. And financial analyst Adam Johnson pointed out the trade component of the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, was up 2%.
He thought it might just be a one-time shift, though.
Yeah, he was optimistic. But our sources are pretty skeptical about that.
Why?
Well, like we said, the full effects aren't even here yet. And there's no obvious reason why it would be limited to just 1 month if the underlying cause, the tariffs, persists.
So the question about economic policy here is pretty stark, isn't it?
It is. If prices are going up because of tariffs, even if it starts as a one-time shift, you add that to normal background inflation, that could become a real headache for whoever's in power.
And this connects to another kind of odd detail from the sources, this idea of an external revenue service, an ERS.
Yeah, that's been floated apparently since before previous inauguration. The idea was an agency specifically to collect tariffs.
But nothing's actually happened to create it.
Nope. And what's fascinating, according to the sources, is the reason why: bureaucratic turf wars.
Ah, different departments want control.
If it's going to collect potentially huge amounts of money, you bet. Heads of various departments all want it under their umbrella.
And the whole idea seems kind of contradictory anyway, right?
Totally. Are tariffs supposed to be a major income source? Or are they bargaining chips to be raised and lowered in trade negotiations? It's not clear.
And the sources mention the irony of potentially sending people checks.
To help them pay for the price increases caused by the tariffs that generated the money for the checks in the first place.
Yeah, it sounds like a classic case of...
A random idea gets thrown out, everyone fights over it, and in the end, nothing actually happens. That's how the source portrays it.
And just to bring it back to the real world, the sources note these tariffs are already hitting supermarket prices.
Yep. Mexican avocados are mentioned, and price hikes are expected on coffee. Brazil beans up 50%.
Chocolate, too.
Up 39% for Swiss chocolate. And spices from Indonesia up 19%. So it's starting to bite.
Okay, so from economic policy, let's turn to more overt displays of power. How influence gets projected.
Sometimes very publicly, very symbolically.
Right, like the deployment of National Guard troops to D.C. that our sources discuss. And also changes happening at the Kennedy Center.
Yeah, the National Guard thing is interesting because the stated reason versus the likely real reason.
What's the stated reason?
Governors from Ohio, South Carolina, West Virginia are sending troops, supposedly at the request of a former president, to help with crime.
But the sources call that political theater.
Pretty much. They point out there's no actual need. Crime in D.C. has been trending down for years.
And the troops aren't even going to the highest crime areas.
Apparently not. So the interpretation is it's really about convincing the political base back home that D.C. is out of control.
And maybe forcing governors to show loyalty.
That too. It's a symbolic gesture.
D.C.'s mayor, Muriel Bowser, had a strong reaction.
She did. Tweeted that using American soldiers to police American citizens on American soil is #un-American. Pretty direct.
And this theme of control or maybe influence extends to cultural spaces too, like the Kennedy Center.
Yeah, that's the other piece. The Kennedy Center honors. Usually the artists are chosen through a process involving the center's staff, the public.
But that changed under a previous administration.
Right. The board was replaced with loyalists that get involved in programming, and now they're helping pick the honorees.
Making them essentially Trump administration honorees, as the source puts it.
That's the term used, yeah.
And the 5 picks this year, they show a pattern.
Seems pretty clear. You've got Michael Crawford.
Whoa.
Why? Apparently, the former president loves Phantom of the Opera.
Okay. Who else?
Gene Simmons from KISS. He's known as a staunch pro-Israel conservative. Then Sylvester Stallone.
Rocky, Rambo, also an outspoken supporter.
Yep. Then George Strait, king of country. He's a Republican, known for work with wounded vets. Arguably, the most conventionally deserving pick.
And the last one?
Gloria Gaynor, which is maybe the most interesting choice.
Why her? Diversity.
That could be part of it, but the main reason, the source suggests, is her song, I Will Survive.
Because it's played at rallies, symbolizing triumph.
Exactly. But the source points out the huge irony.
It's a song about a woman escaping an abusive relationship.
Right. Suggesting maybe the lyrics weren't listened to very closely. Kind of like Springsteen's Born in the USA being misused over the years.
Are people pushing back on this, urging Gaynor to decline?
Yeah, many in the entertainment world are, arguing she's being used as a political prop.
Mel Brooks turned down the honor before, didn't he? Under a previous administration.
He did, and then accepted it later from a different one. And Tom Cruise reportedly said no this year, too.
So what's the overall goal here, did the sources suggest? What's the message with these picks?
The idea seems to be that these honorees are popular, not elitist, implying that past honorees were somehow just for cultural elites.
But past honorees include people like Frank Sinatra, Lucille Ball.
Led Zeppelin, Oprah Winfrey. Yeah, hardly just niche figures. The source makes that point pretty strongly.
It's also striking how many of these honorees had their biggest hits, like decades ago.
Yeah, 40-plus years ago in some cases. Another reminder, the source notes, of the former president's particular cultural frame of reference.
Okay, so from these very public displays, let's shift to something maybe more subtle, but potentially more pervasive. Technology, privacy, and control.
Yeah, the sources touch on this with things like facial recognition tech.
Especially in sports arenas.
Right. There's this idea of the arena of the future at the LA Clippers' new place, the Intuit Dome.
What does that involve?
You have to download an app, upload a photo, and use facial recognition to get in.
And the benefit is supposed to be?
Saving 2, maybe even 3 seconds getting through the gate. That's what they claim.
But does it even work reliably?
Online reports suggest. Not always. It can be glitchy.
So that tiny potential convenience, is it worth the privacy trade-off, especially if it's unreliable?
That's the core question, isn't it? And there's another example given, Madison Square Garden in New York.
What are they using it for?
To keep people out. Specifically, enemies of the team owner. Mostly lawyers who've sued him or lawyers from firms that have sued him.
So they use facial recognition to identify and bar them from attending games?
Exactly. And the concern, connecting this to the bigger picture, is pretty obvious.
The potential for abuse by an administration, for surveillance or controlling access to public spaces.
Right. It's definitely something the sources flag is worth watching closely and, resisting if you value privacy.
These questions of control and surveillance, they obviously cross borders too. Let's look internationally now. Ukraine.
Yeah, our sources give a detailed look at the really complex diplomatic maneuvering around a potential peace treaty.
President Zelensky is visiting the White House.
He is, yeah. And joined by several European leaders who are known for being pretty adept at handling difficult political personalities.
And there's a lot of talk about peace treaties versus ceasefires.
Exactly. The positions seem to be shifting. And one suggested motivation for a former president getting involved is the allure of a Nobel Peace Prize.
But pushing for a peace treaty right now could actually benefit Russia.
That's the concern highlighted. Peace talks can drag on forever, months, even years. And while talks are happening, Russia could potentially keep fighting and grab more territory.
Zelensky, though, knows any peace deal needs real teeth, right? Real security guarantees.
Absolutely. He remembered the lesson of Munich in 1938. Appeasement doesn't work long term.
So what would those guarantees look like?
It would have to be something solid. Allied troops stationed in Ukraine, or just massive weapon supplies with basically no restrictions on their use, even hitting targets deep inside Russia.
And European leaders agree.
They seem to share that view. The EU's top diplomat basically said Russia has no intention of stopping the war soon, and they need tougher measures.
And the human cost, the sources touch on Russia's strategy for keeping its army staffed.
Yeah, it's pretty grim. They offer huge sign-up bonuses, really high monthly pay, like $2,000, $3,000 a month, putting these soldiers in the top 10, 15% of Russian earners.
Plus life insurance.
Generous payouts to families if the soldier dies. So this attracts men from poor backgrounds, often poorly educated, maybe in debt.
Creating an army that the source calls
just meat for the meat grinder.
Wow.
Really stark language contrasting them with the highly motivated Ukrainian soldiers fighting for their homeland.
And speaking of international efforts and stark realities, there's this really disheartening story about international aid. Contraceptives?
Oh, yeah. This one's tough. So after a previous administration dismantled USA, the International Development Agency.
A warehouse in Belgium ended up stuck with supplies.
Yeah. $10 million worth of contraceptives. Enough for over 1 million women in African countries like Congo, Kenya, Zambia.
And now they're set to be destroyed. Why?
This is the crucial point the sources highlight. The order came because some political appointees or believers think using these contraceptives is like having an abortion.
Which medical professionals call a misrepresentation.
A blatant attempt to misrepresent. Yeah, the sources stress these are standard contraceptives, not abortion-inducing drugs, despite the use of the loaded term abortifacients by opponents.
And offers to buy the supplies were rejected.
Even offers from the UN and a London-based health group to buy them and distribute them properly rejected.
Oh, the source had a really blunt take on this.
It isn't about the money. It is about the meanness. That's the quote.
Despite efforts from lawmakers to stop it.
U.S. and French lawmakers tried to intervene, but the destruction seems imminent. And the State Department apparently gave no reply when asked about the abortifacients claim. Just silence.
Wow. Okay, from international aid disputes, let's move back home to the legal arena, the Supreme Court.
And a potential big battle looming over same-sex marriage rights.
This makes you think about how long legal precedents really last, doesn't it?
It really does. While a former president hasn't made same-sex marriage a central focus, some of his evangelical supporters are definitely eager to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges.
That's the 2015 decision that legalized it nationwide.
Right. And their argument is pretty straightforward. If Roe v. Wade could be overturned after almost 50 years.
Then Obergefell, which is only about 10 years old, could definitely be vulnerable.
Especially given the current makeup of the court.
How so?
Well, 3 of the 5 justices who were in the Obergefell majority are gone now. But 3 of the 4 dissenters from that case are still on the court.
So they only need 2 more votes from the current justices to potentially overturn it.
Exactly. It shows just how close it could be.
And states are already acting on this.
Yeah, 9 states have reportedly introduced resolutions challenging Obergefell. Some are even looking at things like covenant marriage.
What's that?
It's a type of marriage license available in a few states that requires premarital counseling and makes getting divorced much, much harder than a standard marriage. It's meant to push back against easier divorce laws.
And that Kentucky County Clerk, Kim Davis.
The one who refused to issue same-sex marriage licenses back in 2015, defying court orders. Yeah, she's now asking the Supreme Court to hear her appeal.
And asking them to overturn Obergefell in the process.
Right. And with 3 justices pretty likely to vote just to hear the case, they only need 1 more for it to get onto the docket. So it's a very real possibility.
If Obergefell were reversed, what would the impact be like?
It would definitely cause a huge stir. Probably not quite as massive an earthquake as the Dobbs decision overturning Roe, just because fewer people are directly affected day to day.
But still a major campaign issue.
Oh, absolutely. For some, it would become a huge rallying cry, arguing the Supreme Court is, running amok.
Okay, so alongside these legal challenges, let's talk about another form of pushback against power. Mockery.
Ah, yes. The sources make a really interesting point about this. Authoritarians, generally speaking, hate being ridiculed.
Why is that?
It makes them look weak, foolish. And if they react angrily or try to bluster their way through it, it often just makes them look even worse.
And this strategy is being used effectively against a former president.
Seems like it. Governor Gavin Newsom, for instance, seems to have gotten it down pat.
How so?
He's been mimicking the former president's very distinct over-the-top style in his tweets.
Using all caps, the initials.
Yeah, like, thank you for your attention to this matter, and signing off GCN like the other guy uses DJT, plus little jabs about tiny hands and little baby stares.
The source calls it psychological warfare.
And says Newsom is much better at it. It gets under the skin.
And where did this strategy come from?
Apparently, credit goes to Newsom's media team leader, Camille Harper Zapata. The source quotes someone saying, "She knows how cavemen think. Make of that what you will."
Okay. Another big example, South Park.
Oh, yeah. Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they just got a massive new contract, like $1.25 billion.
And they're using their platform to go after the former president.
Unapologetically skewer him, as the source puts it. Their recent episode, Sermon on the Mount, apparently portrays him as a tin pot dictator, literally in bed with Satan.
Complete with
tiny hands, yes. And constantly suing everyone.
Why did they feel the need to step up like this?
They basically said they felt they had to speak up because so many other powerful institutions, media companies, big corporations, law firms, even universities seem to be knuckling under to him, afraid of retribution.
And has it worked for them?
Ratings-wise, absolutely. The ratings have apparently boomed since they started taking this approach. Mockery sells, it seems.
And sometimes the administration itself just makes the mockery easy.
Yeah, there was that incident the source mentions. A State Department official accidentally printed sensitive material, not top secret, but still sensitive, at a hotel business center.
And just left it there.
For another guest to find, yeah. Even the White House reportedly called the incident hilarious, which just kind of fuels the ridicule further. Incompetence can be its own punchline.
Okay, wow. We have covered a lot of ground today. Such a complex, interconnected
We
picture.
really have.
We started with that really compelling story, didn't we? Roland Beainy and the Trump Burger. Personal ambition, political branding, legal reality, all crashing together. A very tangled American dream.
Yeah, and then we pivoted to Judge Leonard Hand, that timeless wisdom about the spirit of liberty really needing to live inside us, not just in laws on paper.
Which felt incredibly relevant when we talked about gerrymandering. Those strategic battles, drawing lines on maps that can genuinely shape or even undermine democracy and the liberty Hand valued.
Definitely. And we saw the economic ripples, too, those tariffs starting to show up in consumer prices.
Mm.
Plus the cultural projections of power,
Mm.
from, symbolic troop deployments to trying to reshape who gets honored at the Kennedy Center.
And wrapping up with how people push back. Serious legal challenges that could reshape fundamental rights, like marriage.
Right, the potential Obergefell fight.
And also that very different, but maybe equally potent weapon, mockery. Using satire and ridicule to expose vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it's quite the range of tactics and arenas.
So we really hope this deep dive helps you, the listener, connect these dots, see how these things that might seem separate are actually part of a bigger picture in our society today.
It's definitely a lot to process.
Yeah.
But hopefully, understanding these dynamics, seeing the ironies, the realities,
Mm-hmm.
it helps you feel more informed, more equipped to make sense of it all.
So here's a final thought to maybe chew on. In this era we're in, where personal brands seem to drive so much political action, where you have this historical wisdom like Judge Hand's clashing with very modern challenges, and where satire itself becomes this potent weapon, what does the American dream actually mean to you today? And how do you think its future will be shaped by all these forces we've just unpacked?